took me another second to orient. And I realized that I really had died. And because I had heard stories of this happening to people, and I felt so good. That white light, there are no words to describe that feeling. It's that unconditional love. And it felt like it didn't matter what I had done in my life, good or bad, that I was just loved for who I was. It was very peaceful. And I remember feeling like it was the perfect temperature, even though I don't think there is a temperature in the light. I remember just feeling very warm and comfortably warm. And I was just soaking it in. And I felt like holes were being filled in, wounds that I'd been carrying around were being healed. And it felt good. It felt like I was being made whole again. So I was just soaking it up. I really feel like I was just bathing in it. Right at that moment, I heard this inaudible voice tell me, you have to go back. And it was like a blast. That is the last thing I wanted to hear. I protested, and I don't think I had a body, but I felt like I was shaking my head no and resisting. I protested. I said, no, I don't want to go back. Please don't send me back. And then again, the voice, you need to go back. And I protested again. And right at that moment, I felt like almost like a crowd was gathering around me, but I didn't have enough time to figure out what that was, because then I was immediately back in the tunnel. And it felt like a little bit of a nudge back into the tunnel. And I went backwards, and then just like that, I was back in my body. The pain returned, and then I blacked out until much later that night when I was in pre-op is the next time I really remember anything happening.
Wow. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Especially the dying part. I thought everybody, my family, my friends, my loved ones, I finished a tour in Vietnam and I volunteered to go back. And it was on that extension where, this happened. I made it 2 months into my extension. And I said, oh man, and I started praying. I said, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry that I came back. I made it through my first tour a little beat up, but not serious. And now I came back here and I've hurt you because I was so selfish. I wanted to come back and experience this thing that I thought I was fighting for their freedom. And all of a sudden, God said, you're not ready. I said, yes, I'm ready. You can't be doing what you think you're doing. You're going to try to send me back? I won't go back. You can't show me this and let me feel this love and this no worries of any kind. As I will be alive for infinity. And now send me back in my body, and it's shot up and it's hurting in the middle of the jungles. I won't go back, and you put me back in my body, I'll make sure I die. I felt, like I said, you can feel his emotion. I felt his sternness. And he said to me, he wasn't angry, but he was stern. He's tough love. And he said, no, you cannot take this. Only I can give this to you, and if you ever try to take it, it will never be yours. And I remember, I don't usually talk like this. I'm not flowery in religious speak. And I said, Father, your will be done. And I went back, and the books say sometimes it's a tunnel of light. It's a tunnel of love. The light thing is, to me, in my opinion, is a misnomer. You're surrounded strictly by love, and the love is a bright light, so bright that I call it an incredible clearness, because the mind can't comprehend anything that bright. We're that limited. And so I feel blessed that I had a chance to go through that. It honestly, and I'm not being facetious here, it was worth getting shot for. And I wonder, one thing is, in the Bible it says, blessed is he who believes and has not seen. Well, I wasn't that strong, and I had a chip on my shoulder. Maybe that's what he protected me from, is I am here, I do love you. And he let me see because I didn't believe without seeing. And it changed my life, and that even though I'm still human, I still make my mistakes. I constantly pray to God, give me the strength. I don't want to lose what I saw. I want to be back in your love. And please, just help me be strong. And thank you for everything you've done. Don't take him for granted. And thank you for the blessing he gave me, and that let me be in his presence for, well, there's no time up there, so it was an instant, it was a million years. And that's pretty much the end of what happened to me. I came back in my body, and regrettably I was rescued. And I'm here until the next time, and I look forward to going home again.
To find out how much different it is in reality. What it felt like to be there, as opposed to what I thought it was going to be like. And then there was that thing called Judgment Day in the Catholic Church. Boy, did I fear that one. But the only judgment that we have is ourselves. When we're shown what we've done in this life. And I'll tell you, I had one experience that, even in that side, brought me to tears. And it was at that moment that an arm or a wing wrapped around me and whispered in my ear and said, remember, here you were learning. Now, I expected to get yelled at. I actually even thought about a yardstick taking a swipe at me, because that's what happened in Catholic school. I did not expect to hear that I was simply learning. When I was done, they decided that I wasn't there to stay. And I got to tell you, I wasn't happy about that. They told me I had to come back to this. But I also learned that you don't argue with angels. And so the last thing I heard them say before I left, they told me to remember to love. Because in my life at that point, I had forgotten every aspect of the word love. I had forgotten to love my fellow man throughout the entire globe. I had forgotten to love my nation. I had forgotten to love my state. I had forgotten to love my community, my family. Most importantly, I had forgotten to love myself. I was functional, had a smile on my face most of the time, but inside it was quite a different story. So what did that mean? Remember to love. In my particular case, it was to remember all aspects of love that have to start within. It's like when you're flying on the airplane, they tell you if there's a cabin decompression, the oxygen mask will come down. You put it on yourself first before you help someone else. Because you're not going to be very much help if you're gasping for air. So what is it that we may not love about ourselves? Is it we've been told that we don't measure up? Maybe we've been told that we're just not the same as everybody else. We're not accepted. Better yet, do we not accept the way we look in the mirror? Those were some of my challenges. I couldn't look into a mirror and see anything worth loving. And so it took what I call the cosmic 2x4. God whacked me upside the head and said, hey, look, would you listen for a moment? I don't have any bad days. I certainly didn't have one when I created you. Why don't you love yourself? Does it matter what you look like? How much hair you have on your head? Because I've been lacking that for quite some time. Does that really matter? Or what matters is what is in your heart. Do you walk down the street and smile at other people? Do you open doors? Do you clean up after yourself and make the world a better place than when you came into it? That was the challenge for me.
My heart stopped. I stopped breathing. I guess I was out about a minute, and they brought me back. The minute I came back, the pain returned immediately, the fear. I mean, I just...
all the human emotions.
Yes, everything human came back. And I remember being very angry that they brought me back. And my wife ended up asking a while later, you seemed angry, how come? And I just couldn't tell her. That was probably the most frustrating 6 months of my existence. After experiencing perfection and something so beautiful, I wanted to hold on to it. Didn't want to let it go. And it wasn't easy. After I had recovered the second time and went home, everything just seemed to change. It was almost like I was starting my life all over again. I was a baby. I hadn't made the mistakes that I had made in my life, and things weren't messed up or whatever. And I can recall in my attempt to hold on to this feeling and to hold on to this peace, I began to bump into earthly things, that of course aren't going to escape from you. They're there. My first frustrating experience was with the television. I couldn't watch television. There would be a commercial, a cosmetic commercial. I couldn't. I'd have to turn it off because it was something false. It was unnecessary. It was fake. It just didn't belong. It was insignificant. Any type of violence, if there was even a Western, an old Western movie, I'd have to turn it off because to me that was total ignorance. There was just no reason on earth to show people killing people. That was frustrating, especially when the family's sitting down trying to watch television and Dad gets up and turns it off all the time. So I finally just learned to go to my room. It got to the point where I had a great deal of time readjusting. And it was at that time, I have a very, very close friend who was a priest, we call him Father Bob, who sat down with me a few times and very understanding. He was a man that I know did not experience what I did, but he seemed to know. He knew what I was talking about. Very understanding. Perhaps the most important thing he did for me was to help me to readjust, to accept life, to understand that you are living, that, that is there, it will come again, and that there is much more here, and that I was here for a reason. And it did help. I'm back to watching television. I even like the boxing matches. Come a long way.
And I was part of all things that had happened somehow. I was connected to this, and I could understand it. I could understand so many things so rapidly and completely that there is no way to explain this to anybody. And at some point, I realized I would have to go back. And I pleaded not to return. And I was told, well, you must return. And these beings around me of light indicated you have to return. There's very important reasons. I don't recall what they said. I don't know what the reasons were. But the next thing that happened was very powerful to me and has always stayed with me, as has the whole experience. Although this sounds egotistical, I don't know how to say it other than what happened. Millions, or at least thousands of these light beings surrounded me and began to sing. And when I say sing, they were making music of a beauty that was improvisational and full and complete like I've never heard in this world. And they were basically praising me and sending me back to do God's work. And at that point, the next memory I have, I woke up in a bathroom in this apartment I was at, and I began to look around for a razor blade to slice my wrist. Now this might sound very very desperate, but it wasn't that sort of thing. I simply said to myself, I have to return. I want to return right now. I found a razor blade, and as I did, a voice very clear and distinct said, no. And at the second that voice happened, somebody said, I think he's in here, and the door opened, and I dropped the razor blade, and I went on with my life at that point.
It was in the tunnel where I really realized that I'm dead, and I'm going someplace else. And then I was on the other side, and there was nobody there. I was surprised, because I always thought that when people talked about these things, there was going to be like this whole clan, you know, your friends and your family and people that have gone before you. There was nobody there. But for me in that place, there was just pure joy. All the fear and pain that I had as a kid, all the judgments, all the opinions about who I was supposed to be, none of it was important anymore. None of it mattered. It's the closest I could ever imagine to anybody talking about bliss. And as I got to sort of settle into this place and sort of look around, there was this man that was there. And he looked like a person, but I could see through him. He kind of glowed, and he was see-through, translucent like that, but yet solid. Like you could see he had clothes and a figure and you know, a personage to him. I couldn't make out a lot of his face, like the very specific characteristics of his face, but I got an impression that he was older. I think he was Asian, and I knew that he was somebody important. In this place, there's no judgments or opinions. You're just exactly who you are, and you're loved for exactly who you are. And I started to feel that, and that's not what I felt when I was a kid. Seeing the person that was there, this man that was there, he just sort of wanted me to be calm and wanted me to relax. Then he says to me, I'm not supposed to be here. And he says to me that I have to go back. And then all of that bliss and all that happiness and all that sort of rest goes away. For him to say that I couldn't be there, that I had to go back, and I had to leave this place of unconditional love, that was hard. And I remember protesting, and I remember being really, really, really angry. And the next thing I knew, bam, I was back hovering above my body. And I just was looking at myself, and I was saying, I don't want to be in that. I don't want to go back to that.
Labor was intense, intense. They didn't give me anything for the pain. I remember being on the delivery table and lifting out of my physical body and hovering about ceiling level, and I saw a light coming down toward me, a white light. And the moment I saw that white light, oh, I knew I was in the presence of God. Something in my spirit self knew I was with God. But this nurse below, she's pounding on my chest. Come back, Nancy. Come back. Nancy, you have a son.
So I started, once I felt that feeling of peace and I wanted to stay there, I didn't want to come back to whatever I was doing here. And I remember kind of arguing. This is another portion of my testimony, is a lot of my memory was kind of blanked. I don't remember every detail. One thing I do remember is kind of arguing at the end. Like, well, oh, come on, you know, like I've written Christian music and I've done this and that, and I was kind of stating my case, you know, come on, don't send me back there, come on. And this is when I heard the first actual audible words of my experience, and I was coming back to earth as I heard it. But I started coming back into my body as I was arguing, please let me stay, please let me stay. And then I heard, no, not yet. I heard the words, no, not yet. And that just tripped me out. And like, even though it's so simple and such an easy thing to understand, that those 3 words have been like so profound in my life, and they've changed my life.
And I can hear the children playing and dogs barking. They were happy. You can hear the happiness, eh? And the older people, I can hear them joking around and laughing as well. And I could have swore I recognized some of those voices of people that I knew that had passed. And that man started to talk, and he said, yes, you were chosen before you were born to do a job in the world that nobody else can do. And because of that, and the fact that you made a promise to God, the Great Spirit, the Creator of all things, because you made that promise, you have to fulfill it before you can come back here. And you have to go back. And when he said I had to go back, I grabbed hold of his legs, and I grabbed hold of him tight, and I was begging him, please don't send me back. I don't want to go back.
This world was formed when I returned to it. While I was in heaven, I didn't feel foreign at all. I didn't even question it. I also been asked, did I have an understanding of what the men were telling me? Yes, I was never confused. I was never anxious or worrisome about what they were telling me. I was in an absolute peaceful, joyful state. I cannot tell you how absolutely peaceful the other side is if you're on the right side of the tracks, let's say. It was so good, and it was so amazing that, have you ever asked the question, like, I don't know if I could handle eternity? That would kind of freak me out. That just the idea of eternity is almost more scary to me than even hell. Well, when you're there, you're not scared of eternity at all. In fact, you feel like you've already been there for eternity. It's all that you know. And you have zero fear. The fear gene, let's say, it doesn't even exist in you. Anxiety doesn't even exist in you. It couldn't exist if it wanted to. That is how good it feels on the other side. And for 3 weeks after I came back, I struggled with horrific depression because all I wanted to do was die and go back to the other side. Even to this day, if you came up and put a gun to my face, which no weirdos out there in World Wide Web land, if you were to come up and put a gun to my face and shoot me, I would be like, sweet, I'm going home, finally, yes! And that's absolutely the truth. I kind of feel like basically this was a second birth for me. And finally the pain went away, and my memory started to come back, and I realized, oh yeah, I used to be alive. Oh yeah, this is Earth. Oh yeah, I'm Nathan Wheeler. Oh yeah, this sucks. Because now the only thing I wanted was to go back home. I wanted to go back to the other side so bad that immediately, like depression, realizing that I was being forced to come back to life to do something. I know that sounds like a blessing now, but it was not a blessing to be not in that place. It's torturous.
I was behind, for lack of a better word, a veil. I wasn't in the light, I wasn't in the dark, I wasn't in earth, I was in a place that was quasi-light, and before me in the distance stood a very, very large being of light, a male being of light, indistinct but male, and he said, you need to go back now. And he was quite an authority figure. And telepathy works very well. And so I said, you're the representative of God? And he said, yes, I am. But I really wasn't too thrilled about this prospect, and I wasn't moving very quickly at that point. So by his side, much smaller, appeared 2 ovoid shapes. You might think of them as opalescent eggs. And they were pulsing with light and energy. And from these opalescent eggs, I don't know if there is a word for heart path, empath, I guess would be it. Instead of a thought coming from them, a feeling came from them, and they were my two best friends who always hover by my shoulders, Robin and Chris, who of course are not Robin and Chris anymore. I do my best not to hold them to those identities. And they said, I'm going to give you my nickname from New York City. They said, it's okay, Chef. You got to go back. And ow! This magnificent, huge being that I have become and that every single one of you is, check my grammar there, was squeezed back into this form that felt like it was about as big as a salt shaker. And it was excruciating. It was the most excruciating pain I've ever been in my life. And I lay there going, oh, no, oh.
In irgendeiner Form Ihre künstlerische Karriere beeinflusst?
Ja, im ersten Moment nicht. Also ich habe ja nach meiner Genesung, die sehr lange dauerte, fiel ich zuerst mal in eine tiefe Depression, weil ich nicht mehr in dieses Leben zurückfand. Es ist nicht so, dass ich mich gleich sofort wieder umbringen wollte, um wieder in dieser anderen Welt zu sein, von der wir ja da vielleicht noch reden, was ich da erlebt habe noch. Und, aber ich fand mich nicht mehr zurecht hier. Das hat mich so erschüttert, dass ich nicht mehr wusste, wo ich hingehöre. Gehöre ich jetzt in eine andere Welt oder gehöre ich jetzt hierher? Und das hat mich wirklich, ich habe dann eine Psychoanalyse gemacht, 2,5 Jahre lang, freiwillig. Ich ging zu einer Psychologin und die hat mich nach Freudschem Muster wirklich, also die hat mich nie was gefragt, die hat überhaupt nie was gesagt, sondern ich musste von selber alles entwickeln und über mich reden, meine Träume und so weiter, was mich sehr fasziniert hat. Habe mich damals gut kennengelernt und habe dann erst mit der Zeit realisiert, was mir da wirklich passiert ist. Und es hat mich sehr erschüttert, sodass ich nachdenken musste, ein ganzes Leben forschen wollte, wie kam es, dass ein 20-Jähriger aus seinem Leben gerissen wird, sein Herz steht still, er ist aber immer noch bei Bewusstsein in einer anderen Form. Ich habe dann nicht medizinisch ausbilden lassen, ich habe mit Ärzten, mit Priestern, mit Seelsorgern, mit allen möglichen Leuten habe ich nach Antworten gesucht. Und die medizinische Variante ist natürlich, ja, das Blitzgewitter im Gehirn und die Endorphinausschüttungen, die wir wirken, da solche Halluzinationen. Aber ich musste das verwerfen, weil für mich war es keine Halluzinationen. Ich hatte ja auch schon Drogenerfahrungen, LSD war für mich auch schon durch und ich weiß, wie man sich fühlt unter Halluzinationen. Und das war es nicht. Das war
I said out loud, I'm home. At last I'm home. And the light welcomed me. The light absorbed me into the light. So I was part of the light. And once I was in the light, I knew everything the light knew. I knew all about the universe. I knew everything. About flowers, about plants, about asteroids, about suns, about novas, everything. I didn't have a question for the light. Why? Because I knew all the answers. I had nothing to ask. And we laughed and we played. And by the way, the light has a fantastic sense of humor. We would view some of the really silly things that I did in my lifetime, and we'd be laughing at how serious I took them. Because life down here is an illusion. It's a game. Don't take it so serious. The life has a wonderful sense of humor. And we're laughing and we're talking, we're just having a great time, and then the light says to me, Andy, you have to go back. Now, I'm not going back. I said to the light, I don't think so. I'm home. I'm staying. And then the light said to me for the second time, Andy, you're going back. And I said, no, you don't understand. I don't want to go back into that body. I don't want to go back on earth. I'm home here in the light. And then the light said for the third time, Andy, you're going back. And as soon as I heard the K from the back, I was pushed back into my body, filled with pain and anxiety. And during all of that process, I was now on the beach, and my friends were pushing the water out of my lungs, and I was coughing the water out, and I was completely conscious. And I was crying. And all of my classmates thought I was crying from the pain of drowning. But I was crying because I was no longer in the light. I was back in my body. I was back on earth. I wanted to be in the light. During this entire episode, from the moment I start sinking into the water and the mud, up until the moment I was coughing water out of my lungs on the beach, I never lost consciousness. I was aware of every microsecond of that time. Being in the light was being in unconditional love. Unconditional love means unconditional forgiveness. Unconditional forgiveness causes you to smile forever. That's the story, folks. That's what it feels like to die and come back again.
I knew that I was dead, and I knew I was moving on. I was instructed through my mind, and that person wasn't next to me, but in my mind to get up and start working forward. And I walked up to this white cloud, and an arm came through, only about this much. And it just came through, and I'll never forget it. It was an arm that was strong. It was somebody that had worked either in the farming industry where his arms were big and his hands, I remember, were strong. They were bigger than my hands. They were a lot more meaty. And he reached out like this, and I reached towards his hand, and he said, "It is not yet your time. You have more things yet to do." And he pulled his arm back through, and I didn't see it again because of the cloud that was in front of me. And at that time, I went back into my body. The doctor said that there was a war going on inside of my body. The war was that I did not want to come back because it was so peaceful. I remember him saying what was going on, why was you all over the place on that table? And I told him that I didn't want to come back. It was too beautiful where I'd been. And come to find out, I had a paper on my chest, and it had pronounced me dead for 20 minutes. And I'd been gone. But I was gone in the most peaceful place that I could have ever went.
When I woke up, I was in heaven, and I like to call it home. I was bathed in this beautiful, warm, golden light, and I was surrounded by angels. I was surrounded by my loved ones. I was in the center, and they were all around me, and it was their outlines I was seeing, but it was more than an outline. It was vibration. It was their energy. I was me. I felt what I looked like. It didn't change, but I didn't have a body. I was my vibration, the energy. And I instantly knew that we were all connected, that we were all one. Everyone's energy, everyone's vibration, the divine beings and myself, we all had our own rate of vibration and our own color. And they weaved in and out of each other's. It was like a beautiful harmonic progression. And they made these patterns, and it was deeply profound and deeply beautiful. The light that I was bathed in, and the oneness and the connection and the peace, the contentment, the love that I felt was overwhelming. The light was like wrapping the softest cashmere sweater or blanket that you can imagine that was infused with golden sunshine around you. And it was a feeling for me of exhaling, of finding my center, and of knowing that I was safe and I was sound. Being there was more real than it is here. I felt total peace, contentment, happiness. It was just much more deep and profound. There really are no words to accurately do justice to the experience and what I had felt. It doesn't exist here. in our vocabulary. Magnify that, multiply that times 100 million more. I mean, and that's the feeling of unconditional love and peace and happiness that I was a part of, that I was bathed in. And I can get back there too. Not 100% feeling like I did, but through meditation, I can get back to that being in that warmth and that light. No words were spoken. And when I asked a question, it was answered immediately. It was answered when I started asking the question, in fact. And time there does not exist as we know it. I kept receiving messages at the same time, but separately. And there were 3 messages that I received over and over again. And those were that we are unconditionally loved, that everything's always how it's supposed to be, and that everything will always be all right. And I knew instantly that if I didn't go back to my husband, my family, my friends, my 3 beautiful little babies, I knew that they'd be okay. I was shown the past, not just my past, but the past of everyone and everything. And I just had this knowing. I knew and I understood why everything happened. I understood that going forward in the future, there is a higher purpose and there is a reason for everything, good and bad. I wanted to stay and I wasn't given the option, and I woke up with the doctor yelling at me to open my eyes. I was cold, I was heavy, I was angry that the doctor woke me up. I was angry that he was so mean when he woke me up. I was angry to be back in my body, and all I wanted to do was go back home, because when I was at home, it was just love, peace, joy, creativity, contentment, happiness. There was no cruelty, hate, violence, judgment. It was pure, unconditional love. And I understood when I was at home that we're made up of energy. Energy is made up of this pure, unconditional love, and that love is God. And I understood that. And I did not want to be back here. I wanted to be home.
And in that moment, as I'm looking, the light starts to separate. And I'm going forward through the light, and it's as if I'm floating with this separation of light. It's like walls of illuminated light, a brilliance I had never seen in my life, and a feeling of such joy and overwhelming ecstasy being in this illumination of light. And as I'm moving forward, in front of me there appears 2 rows, one on either side of me, of these hooded beings. And having been raised Catholic, my connection to the visuals of them made them look like they were in monks' robes with hoods, and they were brown robes. And there was no sense of anything except floating in between them, and this overwhelming sense of completeness, cherishness. It's not a real word, but feeling cherished, unconditional love, coming home. It was like coming home. And as I'm feeling these feelings, one of these beings steps forward, the one on the end on the left steps forward, and he speaks to me. And I'm saying he because he felt male, he felt fatherly, he felt protective, he felt caring and kind and loving. And I just felt this sense of connection to him when he spoke to me. A sense of love I had never experienced in my life, a sense of coming home to the very depths of myself, a sense of I am cherished to the very core of my being. I had never felt that kind of love ever. And as he's speaking to me, he says to me, "You can't stay. You have to go back. You have a child." And in that moment, my mind is going crazy, saying, I have just found this incredible sensation, this divine experience. I feel like I've never felt in my whole life, and I'm being told I can't stay. And in that moment, all I can do is say, no, I have to stay. You can't send me back. I'm finally home. I'm finally feeling the connection I had always yearned for in my life, that I thought would come through marriage, through a child, through family, through work that I love. But there was nothing in my life experience that could even come close to this sensation. It was that profound. It was that blissful. And he's repeated to me, you cannot stay, you must go back, you have a child. And I'm thinking about my child, and I'm thinking, who would take care of her if I didn't go back? Because my parents were both dead. My ex-husband, I didn't feel was the right one for her. And my sister was still alive, but I didn't feel that she had the ability to care for my daughter in an appropriate way. And as I'm thinking about who could love and take care and be there for my daughter, I'm realizing that there's no one. And in that moment that I had that realization, I was back in my body. And then I woke up.